Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Ninajirachi album, I Love My Computer. Here we have the debut album from the singer and producer Ninajirachi, who already on her first proper full-length project is showing an incredible amount of promise. Cast with a really interesting take on modern electronic music, as she blends a lot of different genres, mostly a lot of electropop, but even bits of hyperpop and trance in there as well, also making very brief appearances. And a lot of that just managing to come together to create what I think is just one of the most unique and original electronic albums I've heard in a while. Despite all of the big, happy electronic music that's on this album, I find that the opening track, London Song, is quite an interesting way to open the album, just given how it starts. Just having a slightly more bleak and glitchy kind of sound to the beginning, although it does, I think, set the tone still reasonably well as it goes into the rest of the song. And of course, you then just have fantastic production and pacing, as well as just the beats and vocal harmonies being so memorable on this track in particular. And then iPod Touch, I think, is a brilliant continuation from that, not only on a sonical level, but this is the song where the lyrics also starting to show how they can still be one of my favorite aspects of the album. As it sees her reminiscing about slightly older forms of technology and older ways of listening to music before streaming. And she even gets a little bit personal as she talks about how attached she was to all of the music that she had on her iPod Touch, and just how intimately you get to know that music when you don't have anything else available to you. And there are just a handful of moments like that sprinkled throughout the album, and I think that they're used really well and just work so incredibly well with the album's overall pacing. And then building even more on that sound, you have Fuck My Computer, which front to back is just one of the most incredible and infectious songs on the album. Genuinely, just everything about the song is so earwormy. It's just been playing on repeat in my head over the last few days, and every single time I come back to it, I'd love it just a little bit more. As this song overall just feels like an absolute masterclass in electronic production, pacing, and arrangement. And even on a lyrical level, it still feels like it is building more on iPod Touch, but this time maybe even taking it to a almost extreme and abstract sense as she literally talks about fucking her computer. And then coming off of that, you have CSIRAC, which in comparison I think does just feel a little bit weak. Just with how infectious and catchy and unforgettable the previous song was, this one just kind of does pale in comparison a little bit. It does still have a little bit to offer though. I do like the way it builds in a very suspenseful and intense kind of way, although I do unfortunately just find the actual climax itself to be quite disappointing in the end, as it's just nowhere near as epic or even as satisfying as pretty much any other of the climaxes on the rest of the album. And I think overall this song actually would have been better off without trying to have a drop or a climax or anything like that. Not only because the one that it does have I do find to be quite disappointing, but after a song like Fuck My Computer, it would have been nice to have something just a little bit more chill and low-key as a come down, as it really is such an impossible song to follow up with something that could try and be more epic than it. But then you have Delete, which I think absolutely brings the album back completely. I really like the vocal effects on this track, giving her an almost childlike sound, as well as the slightly more organic instrumentation with the very subtle piano in the background, I think being an amazing touch. As that mixed in with all of the rest of the electronic sounds, I think is a really cool style. And then of course you have the climax as well as its lead up and come down, which I think is just such an incredibly well put together moment on the song, and just the overall pacing and the way it flows I think easily makes it one of my favorites. And then All I Am and its accompanying interlude I think are also incredible moments on the album. And then All I Am and its accompanying interlude I think are also really great moments, as again you do have that somewhat suspenseful and a little bit intense build up, but then when you get to the actual climax I do just love how it's so much more low-key and chill than many of the others, which I think is definitely a much needed break from how intense some of the moments on the rest of the album can be. But despite that, I really love how it's able to come through with a much more low-key climax without in any way taking away from how amazing and satisfying it can still be. And then I love how Info Hazard builds so well on the piano moments earlier in the album, but this time with a slightly more ethereal kind of sound to it that ends up giving it a trance kind of quality, which I absolutely love to hear, which is then built upon so incredibly well in the song's climax, not necessarily because it commits to the trance sound, because it definitely doesn't, but it still gives you a moment that I think is just as epic and satisfying as any trance drop could be, without actually fully committing itself to the genre. And then you have Battery Death, which I do find ends up coming across as more of an interlude than an actual full song. Even though it is over 3 minutes long, it is also very repetitive, and I find that it just has a lot less diversity to offer compared to a lot of the other songs. But again, coming off of a song that is definitely one of the more intense moments on the album, something like this I think actually does work really well. And that's kind of why I think that it's a bit of a shame that towards the end of this track it starts to get a lot less melodic and just goes full on hardcore computery noises. I really like Sing Good, it's just a really sweet little song, and definitely feels like one of the most intimate moments on the project, both musically and lyrically, as this track sees Ninajirachi discussing her lack of ability to sing good, but going for it anyway, which is a sentiment that I of course really like. And also just in the way that she talks about drawing a lot of inspiration from the music she would listen to when she was on the bus to school when she was younger. It's You then does feel like a little bit more just like a very standard electropop song, mainly just in terms of the structure and the pacing. It does make it feel maybe just a tiny little bit predictable, but I think the performance is still just so amazing that it does make up for it. Since it is of course blended with the uniqueness of Ninajirachi's style, it still ends up being all around a great song, even if it is maybe just a little bit predictable. Then All at Once, I think, is a really solid closer to the album, as it starts off with a lot of very hard and intense electronic sound effects that are almost bordering on industrial, but then continues on past that and ultimately does give a very satisfying ending to the whole album. I love the way that it does still commit to the sound that it established at the beginning of the song, but without taking it too far, and then does start to incorporate some more typical electronic sound effects by the end that is more the kind of thing that's typical of the rest of the project. And so there really are so many songs on this album that I truly love and are easily some of my favorite electronic songs of the year. And I think that outside of just one or two tracks here and there, this ultimately is absolutely one of the best electronic albums I've heard of the year and even of the decade. And so it really does give me hope that on future projects, if some of the weaker moments can be cut from the album, that we really could see Ninajirachi do some incredible things, as there are already so many individual songs and moments on this album that are easily just some of the best things I've heard in a while in electronic music. I think that many of the strongest moments and songs on this album are already proving that Ninajirachi is just one of the best producers and musicians in modern electronic music, which is why I'll be giving this album an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.